Hey guys, it's Ray here from Hand Tool Look Review. I've got so many questions about this plane that I just thought I'd make a quick video and sacrifice a blank of beach that I've got to the experimental gods just to see what we could put together, just to show you guys some of the options on the plane. So when I made this plane, I made it in two sections, this middle section and the cheek over there. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to make the simplest and fastest scrub plane I can make by making two cheeks and a center section. I'm going to do it two ways. The one that I quite liked the first time around is with these abutments, but this time around we'll glue the abutments in, and the second one, instead of abutments here, we'll drill through and we'll put a Krenov style pin inside of it. What I'm also going to really suggest for both of these builds is I'm going to drill dowels through here and through here in terms of an alignment station. What that's really going to let us do is drill them beforehand, then slice the cheeks and the main body apart, and then use those dowel holes to put it back together. Does mean you're going to have two dowels poking through on the front and the back of the plane, but I think ultimately this is the quickest and easiest way of making a fast scrub plane. So here we've got the basics laid out for the block. I'm going to remove the bottom over here. You want a block that's 9.5 long by 2.5 high. And you're going to mark out here at the 4.5 mark and the 4 3/4 mark, and then draw your lines back there. That's going to be the section that you remove as waste. This front section here is somewhere around 70 degrees. That's really not that important. The 45 at the back though is where you're bedding the iron, so that's quite important. I've marked two spots here and here and here and here that I'm going to use for the dowels that drill through that help us align it later. If we look at the top, what you've got over here, really what you want to do now is you want to put your blade on the top there just to make sure that you can fit it in. Ideally we'd like this is about 3/8 and 3/8 on each side, but you do need a little bit of wiggle room for your blade. So what I do is I just put the blade on here, I'd center it, draw your lines over here so that you can see where the blade needs to go, and you really don't want to overshoot on that line. So depending on how confident you are with your sawing skills, you could choose to go there, you could try and split the difference. You could maybe even allow yourself a slightly thinner cheek. Let's say we put something like that, and then try to saw in on the 3/8 mark, and then we'll plane down on there. So that's essentially the basics of the layout. We'll come back once I've done the pieces. So you can see here I've got my dowel holes drilled in the front of the blank. Please remember to do these before you saw off the cheeks. If you forget to do this, there's absolutely no point in adding it back later. So make sure that you remember to do this before you saw off the cheeks. I've also done something here. I just thought I'd zoom in a little bit and just try and show it to you, where what I've done is I've taken the plane blade, I've centered it like we discussed, and I've run a double marking gauge line here around the sides. What that really allows me to do is to try and keep the saw just between these two gauges, and then I'll know if I'm deviating in either one of the directions. One of the problems with just doing a single line here would be that if you're going off that, you'll probably wobble one way, wobble the other way as you're correcting, whereas this gives you a very good idea if you encroaching into either one of the two pieces. So I just wanted to show that at this point. Okay, so I'm about 50 minutes into the build at the moment, and I finished off one of the cheeks. Just like to show you what sort of fit I'm going for. So you'll see there's a bit of tear out over there, went a little bit deep with the saw. I think at this point it's a bit of a trade-off, because the more I go for an absolutely perfectly milled cheek, the more wood I'm actually going to be removing, and hence the more depth over here I'm going to be losing. So if we put these together and we have a look at what we've got, there's a small line there. You can see once I apply a little bit of finger pressure, that's what we're probably going to close up to. I'm happy with that. Looking on the other side here, let's have a look. Pretty much the same thing. You'll see again, bit of finger pressure. Not 100% perfect, but good enough, and I think that's what we're going for. Remember that quite a lot of this middle section here gets taken out because obviously of the center of the plane. So don't panic too much if you can't get an absolutely perfect match across the entire body. I don't think that it needs to be perfect. Okay, so I'm going to finish up on the other cheek, and then we'll get back together when I start working on the main section of the plane in the middle. Okay guys, so it's half an hour later, and what I've done is I've done the other cheek, done most of the milling. I just wanted to show you something that I found quite useful along the way. Is right at the end I stuck the dowels in, but you can see that really aligns everything up, and you can then go and have a look at it, and you can see there I've got a little bit of a high spot still over here, and because the dowels are in and everything's aligned, I can go around the edges, squeeze it up, check where I'm happy, check where I'm not happy, and I'm going to just mark a few tiny little pieces for spot planing, and then we're basically ready to start working on sawing the main body of the saw. Okay, so those few little tweaks turned out to be about 10 minutes, and once I'd finished that off, what I also did is I took the lines that we'd drawn on the outside, the 70 and 45 degree lines, and I transferred them across to the center block. So you can see there now I've got those lines which I can then cut to, and we really have a matter of now doing a left and a right cut, really pretty simple cross cuts. Just take your time with it, make sure you get a nice job of that, and then you can take the pieces and do a little bit of planing and just flatten that off inside of your vise. We'll come back once we've done that, and we're pretty much ready for the glue up then. Okay guys, so we're basically ready for the glue up. It took me in total 1 hour 51 to get to this point, and this is what we've got. We've got the two central sections that have now been chopped. Took my time to make sure that I planed these two surfaces flat, but I've done very little to the rest of the body, and we've obviously got the two cheeks that we milled up. It's quite good fun at this point just to drop the blade in and, you know, begin the imagining, I guess. So we're pretty close to where we're going. Okay, so I've popped the dowels in. What's nice about that is lets you turn it over, check all your gaps, see if there's anything glaringly obvious that you're not happy with. You can look inside the throat there and check the mouth, and you know, just basically work around the plane, just checking if there's any tolerances that you're not happy with, and you can sort them out now. It's going to be a lot easier to sort out most of the stuff now than after the glue up, because once the stuff is glued, getting into these corners and working becomes a bit of PT. So basically, yeah, 2 hours done. What I'm going to do is I'm going to clamp it up with glue for the night, and I'll be back tomorrow and we can start working on the rest of the plane. Got a couple of pieces of scrap that I'll be using to make the wedge. The other thing I've got is you've obviously got the central section that's come out of here. You can see I really did a pretty terrible job on some of those cuts, so don't panic if your cuts are off there. It's pretty easy to sort this out, and I'll be using these maybe to make some supports on the rear end of the plane. We'll see about that a bit later. One really good tip that I got out of the book that I've just read about making wooden tools was to just avoid putting too much glue right in the throat of the planes. You can imagine once this is glued up, that really means you have to come in here with a chisel and finesse it all out. So put a decent amount of glue on, maybe just be a little bit lighter as you get to the bits that require some accuracy on the inside of the plane. Okay, so here we have it. The plane blanks are glued up, and just thought I'd show a few things here, because I know some of you are probably saying, oh, I could never do that, and it all works so well for him and I couldn't do anything. So remember all that keep the glue away from the throat that I told you about? Well, I guess we'll be cleaning that one up. And the other thing that you might notice over here is that this dowel looks awfully long, and it is because I got the one halfway through and then I snapped it off by hitting it too hard on the end here with the hammer. I was using a mallet. I don't know why, but it just seemed like a good idea at the time. So that snapped off, which means I had to push another piece in from the other side. So yeah, far from an uneventful glue up, but it's together. And I think what's really nice about the system is that these dowels did a very, very good job of making sure that the bottom, in fact, let's just flip that over. Flip that over there. So you can see the bottom here. If I run my fingers across here, there's virtually, I can't even tell where the joints are. And I think that that's really the hallmark of this being a really nice system to use. We've got quite a big throat here because it's a scrub plane, but I think you can imagine that if you've got a very thin opening over here, the advantage of this system of making sure that it lines up perfectly is that you don't have to do a whole bunch of planing and jointing of of the sole later. And the more work you do on the sole, obviously, the more you open up the throat. So that's it for today. We'll leave it there. Pretty impressed that this was sort of a two and a bit hours to get to this place. The first one I made, I was well into the 4-5 hour mark, to be anywhere vaguely comparable. So I think this is definitely a simpler system, and I think if you interested in giving it a go for your first shot, I think that this is a much better way of building it rather than doing the two-part construction that I did the first time around.
Hi, I'm Gabby and I was the cameraman for this video.